Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfic. This will be the continuation of State of Mind. This will be Part 13, Chapter 11, entitled This Venom. Present Mike's voice was loud throughout the stadium. The first match of the second round is a big match. Todoroki appeared at the top of the steps, walking forward, his hands swinging at his sides. The man who's been in second place every time so far and literally left the audience frozen in his first match. From the hero course, it's Shoto Todoroki. Izuku walked up the steps, remnants of his anger coursing through him from his interaction with Endeavor. On the other hand, this guy has won every single time so far. What kind of fight will he show us this time? From the hero course, it's Izuku Midoriya. People cheered at the sound of his name, excited by the prospect of watching him fight again. He supposed he had earned the sports festival a lot of hype with his crazy presence. People seemed thrilled to watch him. He didn't know how he felt about that. The two opponents and friends came face to face in the middle, in front of Cementos. "Remember what I said, Peppermint?" Izuku asked gently, tilting his head at the boy in front of him. "It's not that easy," Todoroki responded, almost inaudibly, over the sounds of the audience. They were both remembering their conversation from earlier. "I never said it would be easy. But you will not be able to defeat me without coming at me with everything. I won't go easy on you." He looked at Todoroki apologetically, wishing there was some better way to help him, some way to get him to realize what took him almost a year of training with All Might to even start to come to terms with. That it was just a quirk. It did not define who you are or wanted to be. Todoroki didn't respond except to give him a plain nod. At this year's sports festival, both have given top-class performances. It's like two great rivals fighting against each other. Present Mike's voice was so loud and confident, but he had it wrong. They weren't rivals. Izuku didn't want to be rivals. He simply wanted to be friends. Why did everyone want to be rivals with him? Now, Midoriya versus Todoroki. Start! A wall of ice immediately shot toward Izuku, but he threw his arm forward, his sleeve exploding off his body. Before his hand even connected with the ice, the pressure from his throw blasted the ice back at Todoroki. Izuku shook his arm out, the leftover tingling from using One for All mildly uncomfortable. The force of Izuku's punch had showered ice around the entire stadium, turning the air frigid and dropping the temperature drastically. Todoroki was thrown back and would have gone past the line if not for his quick thinking, throwing up a wall behind him. Izuku raised his fist, taking a couple steps forward. "I can throw you through that wall, Peppermint!" he yelled. Todoroki looked up, scowling. Another wall of ice was thrown at him, and Izuku did the same thing, this time the clips in his hair flying out, the hair on his left side falling down, partially blocking his vision. A mess. He should have thought about that beforehand and tied it back better, but oh well. He swept his hair behind him, as what looked like snow fell around them. Izuku smiled at Todoroki, taking more steps forward. Another wall, and Izuku tore that one apart too. "You look cold, Peppermint," he said, tilting his head. He really did look cold. Todoroki was trembling, ice forming on his right side. The boy made a noise, similar to a growl, lip curling up, and threw another wave at him. Izuku destroyed it easily, continuing to advance. Todoroki desperately threw up an even larger wall this time, and it met the same end as the last ones. Amidst the chunks of ice raining down around them, Izuku yelled, "If it's an endurance match you want, I'm not even tired!" Which was entirely untrue, but Todoroki didn't need to know that. Adrenaline and anger could power Izuku through anything, he told himself. Todoroki threw up a ramp this time, sprinting upward. Izuku turned, keeping him in sight as he attempted to get in close. Todoroki had probably seen that his hand-to-hand combat wasn't great, his flexibility and alertness allowing him to be very good at dodging and defense, but not offense as much. Izuku punched upward, but Todoroki jumped to the side, easily dodging the blast with a smooth flip as it shattered his ice ramp. Todoroki landed behind Izuku, and Izuku immediately rolled to the side, just as the boy's fist hit the ground where Izuku had just been. Todoroki was fast, though, shooting off a pillar of ice at him. It connected with Izuku's foot, and his body just reacted without his permission, his left hand slapping the face of the ice instinctively. He ripped the entire chunk of frigid frozen water from existence and then fell to the ground, panting. Several meters away, Todoroki was watching him, also out of breath, eyebrows drawn together in a V. Izuku gave him a dark smile, before throwing his arm out in a wide arc, green lightning sparking up his arm and to his fingers. He released the power at the zenith of the arc, and the pillar went flying at top speed straight at Todoroki. The boy barely had a chance to react as it crashed into him, breaking apart into millions of pieces, large and small. That's when the fire erupted through the cracks in the ice, brilliant light illuminating the arena, melting the ice around Todoroki. The boy slowly stood in the wreckage, fire blazing along his left side, eyes fever bright. He was gasping for breath, shoulders shaking. Izuku smiled proudly, tears in his eyes, hands flexing at his sides. Now the fight could really get exciting. Endeavor shouted something from the stands, but fortunately Izuku was good at tuning out walking pieces of shit. Todoroki charged at him, throwing up wall after wall of ice. Izuku dismantled every single one of them with his sparking fists, the blast driving Todoroki back. He was only staying in the lines of the arena because of the walls he had planted behind himself. But even so, he was very close to one of the lines now. Snow and ice continued to rain down around them, and the air was cold. Izuku could see puffs of the air as he breathed. Todoroki yelled in frustration, raising an arm, slicing it through the air as if he was raising the wall of flames straight from the depths of hell. He flung the flames at Izuku, who, acting out of instinct drilled into him by Gran Torino, dived to the side in a powered leap, ducking into a roll, his hair sticking to his face as well as flying about. He really should have tied it up better. As soon as his feet touched solid ground again, Izuku jumped directly toward Todoroki, flinching at the sight of the flames reaching toward him. Pain, hurt, fear, danger, hide. But Izuku was able to lurch out of the way. Heat licked at his arm, and he felt his flesh burning. Just like before. Ignoring it, Izuku landed next to Todoroki, and he grabbed the boy under his armpit, his other hand grabbing his wrist, pinky up, green lightning dancing over his body. A hot fist drove into Izuku's ribs, and something cracked inside of him. Izuku grunted in pain, flipping Todoroki upside down and slamming him through 2 layers of his own ice walls and then smashing him against the ground, across the white line. Todoroki hit the ground with his back, and he arched, choking, all the air knocked out of him. Izuku panted heavily, arms falling to his sides. "Todoroki is out of bounds!" Mike shouted, in his ever-enthusiastic presenter's voice. "Midoriya advances to the 3rd round." Midnight slashed her whip like a judge with a gavel. Izuku breathed in deeply, and then winced, his hand going to his ribs. Something was definitely broken in there. The pain was coming to him now, and there was quite a bit of it. He glanced at his arm and saw the blistered and blackened flesh from where Todoroki's flames had connected. Izuku's vision darkened, switching back and forth from his father's harsh grip on him to the present, and he swayed. Todoroki climbed to his feet as he caught sight of his friend staring at the wound he had caused him. A burn. Todoroki could only imagine what was going through his mind. Todoroki swiftly moved over to him and grabbed Izuku's shoulders. "Look at me," he commanded. Izuku forced his gaze up, meeting the mismatched eyes. "Are you okay?" Izuku tried to inhale but winced. The pain actually seemed to help him because the haze over his eyes cleared slightly. Yeah, sorry." "We're going to head to Recovery Girls." Todoroki looked up at Midnight, who had been approaching them, looking concerned. "Are you able to on your own?" she asked, giving them a once-over. "Yes." Both Todoroki and Izuku answered at the same time. Midnight wiggled, adoring their camaraderie and sportsmanship. Then, together, practically oblivious to the screaming crowd, the two headed toward the tunnel, walking side by side to Recovery Girl's makeshift medical office. Izuku glanced at Todoroki out of the corner of his eye when they finally reached the hallway after the tunnel. The boy was looking straight ahead, a serious expression on his face, brows furrowed. "That was a good match, Peppermint," Izuku said weakly. Todoroki glanced at him, and after a moment he nodded. He wasn't looking forward to facing his father tonight after his loss, but he was proud of how it went regardless. They made it to Recovery Girl's office, and Izuku found Yagi within, waiting for him. A crooked smile spread across his face. Some of the tension Izuku hadn't even realized was there faded away, and his shoulders relaxed slightly. Izuku walked forward, and Yagi buried a hand in Izuku's long hair, rustling it. "You did so well, my boy," he said, and Izuku looked down, chest hitching in a way that had nothing to do with his broken ribs. "Midoriya, who is that?" Todoroki asked from behind Izuku, confusion evident in his eyes, when Izuku glanced back at him. Izuku looked up at Yagi, mind blanking, panicking slightly. He's, "I'm a family friend," Yagi said, and Izuku exhaled. "Yagi Toshinori, pleased to meet you. You two had a passionate fight. Great job as well, Todoroki." Recovery Girl set to work healing them, making them sit down on 2 different cots side by side, chastising them along the way for being reckless or something. Izuku leaned back against the wall, the healing taking it out of him. He ran a hand through the hair on the left side of his head, frowning when it caught on multiple knots. He had lost his clips, and all his other stuff was in his bag. His next match, he would have to... Izuku sat up so abruptly that his back cracked and everyone looked over at him with concern. Recovery Girl in the middle of checking Todoroki's eyes with a penlight. "Are you all right, young Izuku?" Yagi asked. Midoriya's mouth opened and closed several times before he leaned back with an exhausted sigh. "I will have to fight Kachan." Yagi made a noise of understanding before patting his shoulder. "I know that you will do your best." Izuku hummed in response. The harder he tried not to think about his and Kachan's history, the more memories it raised in his mind. He flexed his fingers against his legs, needing something to distract himself with. He looked over at Todoroki and found the boy was watching him. Izuku looked away, heat rising in his cheeks. His fight was coming up soon, and he wanted to take the time to rest and collect himself. He needed to be in a better headspace for his last fight. He never actually fell asleep, but he was able to meditate, drawing within himself to focus on his breathing, while Yagi and Todoroki silently watched over him, as if with some unspoken agreement to protect the innocent boy. It was Yagi, though, that gently shook his shoulder when the time came, letting him know that his fight was coming up soon. Izuku opened his emerald eyes to level on Yagi before sighing and nodding. His sleeves and pant legs were destroyed, but Yagi had another uniform prepared for him. Izuku didn't really see the point in changing when he was most likely going to destroy them again, but he did so anyway at Yagi's insistence. Izuku headed into the bathroom adjacent to Recovery Girl's makeshift office and changed into the new uniform. He threw his old uniform away. It was ruined. He then turned to the mirror, looking himself over. He looked tired. Lack of sleep and all his fights so far had taken it out of him extremely. Plus, the stamina-draining healing definitely had not helped. His hair was a disaster, too. Not as much punk-looking now as much as just not taken care of. Izuku bent down to check the sink cabinet, making a celebratory noise when he found a lot of general bathroom stuff. Cleaning supplies, feminine products, a hairbrush, and even hair ties. Izuku set to work, struggling to get the hairbrush through the rat's nest that was attached to the left side of his scalp. After that, he swept the hair back from his face and tied it up at the base of his head. That was better. He then washed his face and looked back in the mirror. His eyes were hard and steely, his lips pressed in a thin line, his skin pale. He thought he looked a bit like an anemic samurai, with his hair back like that. When he left the bathroom, Todoroki was also standing, preparing to leave, while Yagi spoke with Recovery Girl in the corner. They both looked up when he was exiting the bathroom. "Good luck, my boy. I'll be watching," he said, and Izuku nodded his head to him before heading to the door, Todoroki following behind him. "You have history with Bakugo," the other boy stated, after a minute of silence as they headed down the hallway. Izuku looked down the hallway, his teeth gnawing on his cheek and his fingers picking at each other in front of his chest. "You could say that," he said in answer. Todoroki hummed thoughtfully. "You seem to have an adverse reaction most of the time, but you also like him." Izuku supposed it did seem like a strange relationship. From an outsider's perspective, well, it was a strange relationship, to be honest with himself. Izuku had admired the boy almost his entire life, despite the bullying. Izuku scratched the back of his head before sighing. "He was kind of one of my bullies before UA," he explained softly. Todoroki looked at him sideways, a falter in his steps before continuing at Izuku's pace. "One of your bullies. Did you have many?" "Mm-hmm," Izuku answered absently, as they reached a fork in the hallways. One way led to the tunnel and to the arena. The other would take Todoroki back to the stands and their classmates. Izuku was surprised to note that he didn't want Todoroki to leave him. "Good luck, Midoriya." Todoroki nodded to him, his face as expressionless as always, before leaving him alone, heading down the right hallway. Izuku sighed to himself, looking down the left hallway and then the tunnel at the end of it. He squared his shoulder and lifted his head, breathing evenly. He could do this. Todoroki headed up the hallway to rejoin his classmates. In a way, he was unsurprised when his father found him, blocking his path onward. The walls suddenly felt much closer than they were, the lights too bright. "You're in my way," he told his father, with carefully little intonation. "I'm disappointed in you, Shoto." The sorry excuse for a father began with. The same vile twisting in his gut hit Shoto with those words, but he was used to it, so he just leveled a practiced, emotionless gaze at his father. "How surprising. I need to go now." Shoto walked forward, sidling past Endeavor. The man said something else, but Shoto ignored it, paying attention to the sound of present mic announcing Bakugo. Midoriya would be announced next, and Shoto wanted to see all of it. Midoriya was his friend. Shoto was not going to let his first real friendship go sideways. He knew Midoriya was worried and anxious about fighting Bakugo, and he didn't blame him for that. It just meant that Shoto even more so needed to watch. The boy had very obviously had too much negativity in his life. Shoto had already seen him panic on how many occasions? Shoto would protect him. All right, listeners, this concludes the first half to Chapter 11. I felt this was a good place to stop it right before we move into the fight with Bakugo, so let me know your thoughts and reactions to this chapter with Izuku and Todoroki's fight, and as always, thank you all so much for listening.